you should be data-driven. And that's why I launched IT Harvest. If you think about it, the name Harvest came from, I'm going to harvest all the data on cybersecurity vendors.
But you hit on something that's really important here. And I believe it's the difference between how to learn versus what to learn, what to learn. And I think that growing up, we were all taught what to learn. But when you learn how to learn, I truly believe that's where the power is.
The vast majority of organizations are late adapters. They don't move quickly.
Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast, the show where we bring experts in the cybersecurity industry to share their valuable knowledge, experience, tips, tools, techniques, and resources to help you become a top cyber pro. And now, here's your host for this episode, Terry Thompson. If you want to achieve success, you must make data-driven decisions. And today we have expert Richard Stiennon online here today, and we're going to dive into some of those data-driven decisions. Richard, nice to meet you, man. Welcome to the show.
Likewise, Terry. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I love it, man. Look, here's the deal. With technology and threats continuing to advance, what are some emerging opportunities and threats to be on the lookout for?
Oh boy. So I think the threats are going to come from the thing that we saw demonstrated with both NotPetya and SolarWinds, which is attacks against the infrastructure of software developers. The answer is not for the software developers to get their house in order, which is what all the way up to the US government they're just focusing on, right? It's, yes, everybody should shift left, build security in, have good CI/CD processes, no question. But that's just like telling everybody to patch whenever there's a new vulnerability. It's great, and yes, you should do it, but it's not going to happen. And there's 3 or 4 million independent software vendors out there, and they're not all going to do this. And yes, SolarWinds is definitely doing it. They were the brunt of that attack, and they're going to do something about it. But, what about everybody else whose software you download all the time? Not going to do it. So the opportunity is to come up with a solution. I can't. I'm not a software developer, but come up with a solution that will protect an end user organization in particular, against malicious software updates. How do you do that? Well, you could just not update, right? Ignore every piece of advice from security pundits you've ever heard and don't patch. And then you won't get hit. At least you won't be patient zero of a new sophisticated attack. Or let's see, you could sandbox everything and run it for a while to see if it triggers. But attackers know how to evade sandboxes, and they know, okay, we're just going to dwell for 9 months in your sandbox. You won't do anything. You'll update, and then we got you. And that's the problem with SolarWinds. It took 9 months for them to detonate.
Yeah,
okay. Go ahead. I could go on forever.
I'm always looking for I always love conducting SWOT analysis, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and anything and everything that I do. And I think there's something to unpack there with what you just said right there. So looking for streaks, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. When you talk about the sandboxing there, a lot of times threat actors, they'll just kind of camp out. They'll hang out. You won't even really know they're a threat, but they're there. And I truly believe that that's really kind of leaves the ball within their park right there. I don't update things just because I like the way things are running. I don't want to update. Right. I don't want to do that. But you kind of have to. It's one of those things to where if you're not aware of what's out there, you might not even be aware that it's out there. Like what I just mentioned, do that SWOT analysis. And even when you do conduct your due diligence of looking for things, you might not understand that you're even at risk.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Totally agree. I think since it's almost impossible to know whether an update is safe to install, you've got a conundrum. And one of the things you could do is reverse engineer the new update and get as close as you can to understanding what it does. You could diff it with the previous update and see what changed and see if it matches what the vendor says they were going to change. But I agree with you. It's I've always been suspicious of updates, especially from, the free things like, well, Chrome for sure, but iTunes back in the day when they updated every week. And you never knew if the update was to fix something, especially a vulnerability, or Apple had just figured out a new way to use your information and needed to collect more information from you. In other words, reduce your privacy. So yeah, huge opportunity for the attackers.
Crazy. That's really crazy, especially like you really hit on something right there, and that's online data protection. And I truly believe that online data protection is a problem. It's a huge problem. I feel like most of the data that companies collect is really irrelevant, and they should not be collecting that. And as more and more data gets collected, it really leaves the door open for them to be vulnerable to these attacks. And I think that's what a lot of these attackers, they're after the data because the companies are collecting the data. And I think that if maybe they didn't collect so much data, maybe they wouldn't be such a big target. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally agree. I think one, you open yourself up to compliance issues, right? So you spend all this time fine-tuning the user experience on your website. And now the first time somebody visits your website, you put up a big thing that blocks all the text that says they're going to collect cookies. Just don't do that. I try and review my site, make sure everything I plug into it doesn't have cookies in it and won't collect cookies, just so I don't have to do that. And I'm just like, I'm not going to pop up something that says subscribe to my newsletter, right? It's just, don't have any data, and it's a lot easier to protect it. That's actually why I'm so enthralled with data erasure. Just published a book on it. I worked in that industry for a couple of years, and it's the only thing you can do to your data that makes it totally secure from theft, right? Is get rid of it.
And it really kind of leads me down the path of how much data does a company really need? Yeah. I mean, honestly, with social media and a lot of the things that are out there, number one, I think that it's really easily to be socially engineered these days. I mean, it truly is. And I've watched videos that just absolutely drive me nuts because the person was totally socially engineered, led, and they're just giving information away. It's like, oh yeah, here's this and here's that. And who hasn't heard this kind of thing? But how much data is really enough?
Yeah, if you talk to the people developing large language models, they want all of the data. They want to incorporate it somehow into a mass, just like data lakes or defenders who are moving towards just dumping all the data into a huge pile and then letting whatever artificial intelligence or good search algorithms, vector-based, to determine what's critical in that. And I understand it. It's that's what I do, right? I collect data because I truly believe in your opening statement that you should be data-driven. And that's why I launched IT Harvest. If you think about it, the name Harvest came from I'm going to harvest all the data on cybersecurity vendors, and that will give me insights. And it certainly has. It's phenomenal if you just lay it all out there. All during 2022, people are talking about the downturn and this is the desert for venture capital and all the rest. It wasn't at all, right? 54% of all vendors actually hired people in 2022. There were $17 billion in new investment, the second highest year on record. It was great. Of course, it was all great until Friday, March 10th. SVB shut down. But other than that, it was all great.
Yeah, and you have an absolutely amazing online resource. So you've got books and you've got your online resource, as you just mentioned right there. How exactly does that help the cybersecurity industry? Because I truly feel that there's, the more data that you have, that you can make better decisions. But what data do you actually collect to help people make those decisions?
Yeah, so just the most important thing I do is I find all the vendors. We're up to 3,315 this morning. And I categorize them. I actually say what they do. So, which is a tremendous amount of work. I've put 4,000 hours into doing that. If you go to a vendor website and it says they use zero trust to counter the most sophisticated threats against the enterprise. That just told you exactly zero about what they do. But I dig in, and the product names usually reflect what they actually do. And you go, oh, okay, IPS, great. And then I categorize them. And I do that for 3,000 vendors. Of course, I had to look at 22 or 23,000 vendor websites that claim to be vendors, but we're actually resellers, consultants, et cetera. And then you can categorize, and then you can watch the growth in headcount. Data comes from LinkedIn for that. And you can know that API security is the fastest growing segment right now. Fraud prevention is the slowest growing category. And does that tell you that fraud prevention is not being purchased? Or does it tell you that it's mature and we're actually pretty dang good at fraud prevention now? There's enough solutions out there that do it. Deception also suffers dramatically. And right now, the biggest category is governance, risk, and compliance, because we're entering that phase one. It's easy to create a GRC product because it's just a damn spreadsheet that you turn into a web app. And there's a lot of compliance regimes that are just growing and growing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the more that the online threatscape really increases and changes, that compliance is really challenging to keep up with. It really is.
Yeah.
What would be your best recommendation to stay ahead of the things? How can we stay ahead of these things in reference to compliance?
Yeah, pick a framework and actually deploy it and work it and make sure everything fits into the framework. Everybody's in the US anyway is gravitating towards NIST. NIST is far better because it's more modern than the ISO standards, which are literally all about documentation and planning. And then just build on that, right? If you're NIST compliant, there's no regulatory regime for NIST, right? Nobody's coming in and saying, we're going to audit you for NIST, unless you're a government contractor. But that gives you the framework. So if you go, okay, now we need to be SOC 2 compliant, piece of cake, right? You already got all the elements. You might have to add some controls to be SOC 2 compliant. Or if you go all the way to FedRAMP, the controls that you're missing, so you just add them in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm looking at your chart here and you just referenced all of like GRC, data security, network security. Down here at the bottom, I find it interesting, stealth. Yeah, I think I do. I really find that really interesting. So for me, I think that the fastest person wins, but it seems to be down here at the bottom on your chart.
Yeah. Okay. So it's funny because I just had a subscribers wondering about my stealth category, and it meant we don't know what they're doing, right? It doesn't mean that they're a Unisys stealth, right? Which is actually just zero trust. So yeah, we discover companies, as soon as they've got a name and a founder says, hey, I'm now a founder of stealth company. LinkedIn doesn't help you there because there are 22,000 employees at stealth, because a lot of people are not revealing who they work for. Mm-hmm. But that just is an indicator for us to track them and check in on them every month or so and see if they've actually started to tell us what they're all about. And then they fall into one of the other categories. That's why there's so few. At any one time, there's only 2 or 3 that I've identified as stealth.
Yeah. And I truly believe that education and training is important. And I think that there's a huge opportunity right now that's out there. I'll give an example myself. I served in the military for 24 years. A lot of my training was on the job training through the military. And then I started investing within myself over the years. And I truly believe that there's a huge gap out there within the cybersecurity industry, within the IT industry. And I don't think it's really a lack of resources. It could be lack of training, but it could be lack of leadership and mentorship. How do we bridge that gap? Or what do you think is the biggest contributor to the gap within the cybersecurity and IT industry?
Yeah, I think the big issue is that for some reason, universities never had cybersecurity programs, right? Even my alma mater, University of Michigan, to this day, does not have a cybersecurity degree. They do have a certificate program, but that's just outsourced to a third party that runs it. And all of the community colleges jumped on this bandwagon. Oh my gosh, we can educate our students and get them jobs in cybersecurity. Completely failing because they chose certified ethical hacker as the goal, right? We're going to get them through these classes, teach them networking, teach them endpoint, teach them, Python scripting, and they're going to get their CEH and they're going to get jobs. Nobody hires CEH people, it just doesn't happen. Nobody wants that. If you need ethical hacking, you either go to the 150,000 consultants that are out there doing that, or a automated breach service that tries to break into your system. So what we should be doing, and I've been harping on this for 30 years, in our educational institutions, we should teach how to use tools. And that's when I got my degree from University of Michigan in Aerospace Engineering, the only tool I learned how to use was something called MSc Nastran. And I answered a single ad in the paper for somebody with that experience and got my first job. So why aren't we, learning Palo Alto network management and configuration? Certainly Cisco, which to this day is the best training, which they push out through high schools. Fantastic. But every single vendor should be going down that path, the way Apple Computer did and took over the university systems, right? People come out of university or high school with understanding of how Apple works. And, it just never happened in the Microsoft world.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen like some of these organizations that are out there that are offering organizational specific type training and certifications. But you hit on something, and I actually thought about taking some of these certifications just to put within my toolkit. Hey, I know that I'm certified, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's important. I mean, I've taken certification courses that was completely outside of my scope of what it is that I actually do, just because I was like, okay, maybe there's something there. Maybe I can put something within this particular field in my toolkit. How is cross-fielding important within your own education? Because I truly believe that there's an opportunity there with that.
Yeah, completely. I agree. Because I've always been interested in practically everything. And, so my second degree is in military history. Just because, as you get older, the degree doesn't help your career, but you might as well learn something you're interested in, right?
My degree's so outdated, it's horrible. That's why I have to stay relevant.
So I think the path to go is always be a learner, no matter what you're learning. And, I would say rather than a new certification, if you're looking for a job, would be to go through the training for one of the vendors. So sometimes they'll do it for free, sometimes it costs $2,000. But, if at the high level, at the CISO role, the ingestion of resumes for applications looks for CISSP. If you don't have it, you just don't make the cut, period. And that's unfortunate. I could not get a CISSP because I disagree with the entire philosophy of security that it promotes, right? I'm not a believer in half the things. So I'd have to not only be able to know the right answer, but I'd have to overcome my desire to put my right answer instead of what they're expecting. But I could probably do that.
I do the same thing. I put a lot of, my own thoughts and experiences into things, and I try not to. I try to stay open-minded, and I mean, I get it, but you hit on something that's really important here. And I believe it's the difference between how to learn versus what to learn, what to learn. And I think that growing up, we were all taught what to learn, but when you learn how to learn, I truly believe that's where the power is. What are your thoughts?
Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. To some extent, my bachelor's taught me how to learn where to find the answer if you're an engineer. So of course, mechanical engineering doesn't do me much good right now. But it taught me a lot that, hey, the answers are there, they're in a book, And half of becoming an expert in a field is knowing where to go to get the answers. But on top of that, I spent most of my time in school just living in the stacks in the libraries, researching other stuff. And that's part of, my makeup, right? It's always have ideas, and I want to learn everything about, how to raise cultured pearls, or, how to, back then it was, solar energy was a cool new topic. And I just delved into all that and learned as much as I could using the tools I've been given, right? I can understand physics and chemistry and electro balances.
Yeah, I love that, and a lot of people don't really take the time to educate themselves. And I truly believe that right therein lies some of the problem as well too. Reverting back to when we was talking about being socially engineered and how easy it is to be attacked and so on and so forth. And within one of your books, you talk about cyber warfare. I believe you have a couple of books talking about cyber warfare, and it's becoming more and more relevant. Cyber warfare is becoming more and more relevant. And I think that the more stuff that goes online, the more relevant cyber warfare is becoming. I believe that it comes down to education, knowledge, skills, and experience. Education. I'll use my dad as a great example. My dad was recently, like, not only socially engineered, but he was forced into like buying all this software he didn't need. Vendors. This vendor was like vendor certified. They weren't the experts. They were just like certified to sell the stuff from a vendor.
Right.
And he was socially engineered to believing that, okay, there was something wrong with his computer. He needed this, he needed that. And for me, I'm looking like, Dad, oh my goodness, like, why did you do it? He spent thousands of dollars over the course of like 3 years. And when I found out about that, I was upset. I was highly upset. And I was at the house, and one day these people actually called, and I was like, give me the phone. Give me the phone, because I'm about ready to have fun. Now here, hold my beer and watch, kind of a thing, right?
Good for you.
I literally for an hour just destroyed these guys, right? And it was one of those things that I can kind of sit here and pound on my chest a little bit about how, how this happened. But look, it's cyber warfare. It truly is. And the more education that you have, the more training that you have, the more awareness that you have, you will not be taken advantage of, like what I just shared about my dad right there. How do we combat, or how do we train cyber warfare or cyber education? How do we prevent cyber warfare?
Well, we certainly don't do it the way Annapolis does. So the Naval Academy in Annapolis, where, speaking of applying for jobs, I applied there. And they called it it was a role of, professorship, could be a civilian, in the cyber science curriculum. So I applied for the job. I actually got an interview, and the entire team is on there. And the first question they ask is, what languages can you teach? And meaning computer languages. And I'm going, well, Fortran 77, I could brush up on that. No, they are teaching every single midshipman, the plebes, the entering class. I don't know if plebes, but anyways, midshipmen, when they come in, they're teaching them Python scripting, which has got nothing to do with cyber warfare, right? It is, yes, it's computer literacy. That's great. But what are they going to do? When they deploy them to ships, what actual tools are they going to have on hand to counter attacks against the ship infrastructure and the overall global network infrastructure? And so that's a problem. I think they should be teaching history, and which they certainly do, both at Annapolis and the Air Force and Army, but then bridge the gap to modern warfare and the use of cyber means. So they understand that, right? These are going to be the future officers, right? They're not the people sitting behind the screen triaging alerts. And we really have to take that into account, because guaranteed our adversaries do have people thinking that way. China, the US has rightly pointed out, is a primary adversary in cyberspace, and they have organized training. They pull from universities to do it, just like Israel does. United States doesn't have that. There is no way to attract the best and brightest math students and creative people into a cyber program in the military.
Mm-hmm. You know, and Python why is Python so popular? And here's the reason why I asked that, because I have a coding buddy of mine that I talk to quite often. And we're in this conundrum of like Ruby on Rails and all these different languages and this, that, and the other. And so I'm learning Ruby on Rails at the moment, but I was stuck between Ruby and Python. Why is Python so popular?
I think because it's the best way to answer questions against structured data. I'm learning Python just so I can write those scripts, because I constantly have this huge data set, and I want to, you know what, we didn't build it into our tool yet, but I just need one answer. How many vendors are in California? The question I'd like to answer is how many vendors in California use SVB as their bank. If I had the data, then I could quickly get the answer with a Python script. It's fast, but something came to my rescue, which is ChatGPT. I just asked ChatGPT for the script. I know enough that I can tell when it's misformatted, and I can adjust it until it works.
Yeah, I just did that the other day with a Ruby script. I was sitting here like, oh my goodness, you know what? Let me get over to ChatGPT and see what it has to say. And it's not perfect. I mean, it's definitely not perfect technology. It's there, it's available. It's all the hotness right now. And there's a lot of people that's talking about it, but is it secure? Can it give good information, bad information? Can you teach it the wrong information? There's a lot of stuff around this. And I believe there's something there. But really it's like good. It's like ChatGPT is almost like having a good assistant, so to speak, not a great assistant, but a good assistant, but there's still flaws. There's still weaknesses. It's still learning. It's still evolving. What are your thoughts on that as a tool?
I think it's the most exciting technology in my life, right? The internet was the first thing that was that exciting to me. And first of all, the power is its ability to interpret your questions. So as we've done with our platform, we just took all of our data on 3,000 companies. We obfuscate it, because we do not want to give OpenAI our categorizations of all the vendors, because then it'll be in the next model, and anybody can just ask it and get the same, take all the value from what we've done. Mm-hmm. So we anonymize it, give it the data, and then we interpret questions from our users and run them against our data. So it's not the big, huge internet that it's looking for. So we're only using half of what GPT is all about, which is the natural language processing. And we get incredible results. We don't have to write any scripts or anything. We just ask it questions. Who are the top GRC vendors in Turkey? Boom, here they are. It's just amazing.
I love it. I've embraced the technology as well too. I mean, you're going to have people that are going to catastrophize things and blow.
There'll be downsides for sure. It's just like the internet has many, many downsides. But the overall, we'll ratchet up the overall world in amazing things we can do, and hopefully benefits.
I agree. I mean, it's one of those things to where I think that if you just embrace the technology and figured out how to use it, you're not going to lose your job. You're going to have a job. I think it's going to create jobs as well too. And I've already started to notice some different things pop up. Like, hey, we're looking for, for script writers, for people, I can't remember the exact term, but basically in a nutshell, looking for script writers, how to gamify or how to, systemize ChatGPT into doing certain complex things.
I love the term prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering. That's it. Yes.
It's a great term.
That's the one.
Yeah. And it's truly, you have to do that. Now there are prompt engineering templates that people have for you. And there are tools to generate prompts that get the results you want. And it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. You're 100% correct. Prompt engineering. And I think that it goes back to one of the things, if you want better answers, learn how to ask better questions.
Yeah.
How important is questions in anything that we do within this life?
So important. I am, for some reason, wired to respond to questions. I know. So if somebody wants me to write a white paper or do something, I say, great, give me some questions. And, or of course, on LinkedIn, people are asking me questions all the time, and that just totally drives me. I've got to know the answers. On the other side, I question every declarative statement I see, and I can't help it. If somebody says, humans are the weak link and we got to fix the human, I totally say, wait, is that true? And if that's true, is that the answer to make humans better? And any of the declarative statements about cybersecurity, I'm all over. I'll just take the other side. I just can't help it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that, because I believe that, from a human perspective, I truly believe that everything begins in the mind. Anything that we say, anything that we do really once became as a thought. Once you think it, you can decide, you can act, you can get results, modify, tweak, or change, continue taking action. It's a process. What is your process for how you approach the things that you do within your business?
Yeah. So once a question's been derived, either from my own questioning or somebody asks me, then I look for data and gather the data. And then I look at the data and I say, well, I don't even go in saying, it'd be nice if the data showed that, yes, there's a huge problem, or yes, there's a huge solution. But I look at the data first before I go, it does support that position, or actually it doesn't support that position. And then I go down, I try not to get too invested in the answers I'm looking for. And I just put the data out there. So when people say it's the end of the world for cybersecurity because of the economic thing, I just look at the data and go, no, it's not. Or years ago, somebody who used to be in the privacy side of things for the state of Colorado made an offhand comment to a Reuters journalist in Riyadh, and she said that cybercrime was bigger than the global drug trade. And that just took off. That was the biggest number. It was over $100 billion. And that became a meme that everybody repeated. And I just, took me a couple of years to kill it. And finally, TechCrunch, wrote up my arguments, and I think it was over. Now we've got a brand new one that cyber attacks cause $6 trillion a year in financial damage. Just, this is where I think everybody should have more engineering background, because most people don't know the difference between $1 billion and $1 trillion. And just can't visualize it, and can't realize that $6 trillion is, bigger than the economy of, I don't know, Japan. And it's not happening. There's not $6 trillion, but everybody grasps it. Even the World Economic Forum led with that in their report. This is just some marketing guy in California who made that number up whole hog. The McKinsey had a huge report on cybersecurity this year, and it led with that. And not only that, it projected it growing 24% compound average over the next few years. It's just drives me batty.
Yeah. And look, here's the thing. Cybersecurity, there's always going to be a need for it. While there's an internet, there's online, and it's continuing to grow, it's continuing to emerge as emerging technologies continue to come about and become more and more relevant, and other things become less relevant. I truly don't believe that we have a lack of cybersecurity or a lack of resources, but as some of these data breaches continue to happen, it would almost appear as if we do. And that's where you come into play, because you solve that problem with giving a list of vendors. You have your yearbook, and you have your platform that gives people valuable resources that they can go find information, look for information, and make the best choice. I think there's definitely not a lack of resources. How is your company, how is your resource positioned to be the number one resource out there for people?
Ooh, that would be really aspirational. All I'm trying to do is use data to give you more nuanced and better information than going to a traditional analyst firm. So if you go to a Gartner or Forrester, they're going to pay attention to what their customers use. Their customers are late adapters. So we're talking, big banks and insurance companies, manufacturers. So they only have to cover like 5% of the entire space because their customers don't buy from a startup in Israel who just got $100 million in funding. But for many problems, the right solution is one of those companies. So I hope to just make that data available so that you can make an informed decision about what product you should be using, especially if, there's always a new threat and there's always a new company that addresses the new threat. Your existing company, your Palo Alto, your Fortinet, your Cisco will address that threat 4 years from now, but first they're going to spend $1 billion on acquiring the ones who have the solution. So if you want to be, forward thinking, you need to understand what's coming up in the vendor space. That's what I hope to do.
Yeah. And you hit on one of the countries, Israel there, and it's number 2 with vendors in the, why is Israel number 2?
Bunch of cool reasons. One, they, the leaders in cybersecurity are the ones who were attacked first. And that's why Lockheed Martin is still my gold standard for good SOC operations and good defense, right? Because they got completely owned in 2008 timeframe. Israel's been under attack from day one, right? They've got adversaries who want to blow things up and shut down their trains and turn off the lights. So over time, they built up the famous Unit 8200 to, let's face it, they're a military organization. They are actually doing the attacking. So they're attacking their adversaries using computers and networks. So they've got this, and they've got universal conscription. So they don't have to recruit. They just go to all the high schools and capture the smartest kids and put them in this unit. And they usually have to work in the unit for 5 years. So it's an option, 3 years or 5 years in the military. So when they come out, they are well versed in attacker methodologies because they are the attackers. One of, Cyber Reason is a great example. The founder, Lior, came from 8200 and went on to Mossad. So he also worked at Mossad, their spy agency. So their CIA equivalent. And then, because he's claims he could successfully break into any target, he created a company to help people avoid being broken into. And that just is repeated over and over and over. And going way back to Checkpoint Software, Checkpoint got some very minor initial investment from a software partner they were working with. And then later, a venture capital firm from Israel jumped in, and then they went public and everybody got rich. Founders got rich, stockholders got rich, the investors got rich, and they wanted more of that. That started the second element required for there to be a Silicon Valley of cybersecurity. You have to have money, and you have to have money being invested and an ecosystem around that. There have to be multiple investors bidding for deals. And of course, once you get that, then you got multiple entrepreneurs going, oh, this is a way to make money. They don't consume cybersecurity in country, right? It's a tiny, tiny country. I think it's smaller than the state of Michigan, geographically and by population. So they have to sell to the rest of the world. So they have to create products that will scale and go to the rest of the world. I like to compare it to Germany, Germany and the UK are coming up close behind us for a number of vendors, but the vendors in Germany don't matter to the rest of the world. So it's okay if I'm missing 70 of them as I am right now, because they're not selling to the rest of the world. They're only selling within Germany. In Germany, you start a company by getting customers, building a product, and then you go back to those customers and say, what do you need to buy today? Or the customers come to you and say, hey, we need a endpoint protection solution. Okay, we'll make one for you. So now there's yet another, endpoint protection solution only sold to those clients in Germany, and then they might expand to other German companies. So anyways, you end up with hundreds or over 200 in Germany of vendors that don't sell in the rest of the world. So it's definitely, Israel's the one to watch because their path is usually to move to the United States and expand here.
Yeah, and I love your resources, and it's one of those things to where here's what I believe in. I believe that content creation is really important to inform, educate, and entertain. So you have your resources, you have your platform, you have your book, your books, and I truly believe that there's an opportunity out there for some of these vendors to potentially create content that can inform, educate, or even maybe entertain. How would you recommend these vendors becoming more and more visible, more and more relevant? How can a vendor position themselves out there to be more relevant and more visible to where people know about them?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it, to me, it started with Symantec's annual, I forgot what they called it, something report. And of course, Verizon with their breach report have demonstrated the value they add, right? It's they haven't connected the dots to that much value presented to the world, followed up by increased sales and revenue. Not sure what that formula is, but for sure, in the cybersecurity arena, people are gluttons for information. Not so much insight. So it doesn't do any good to pay whatever it costs to be on the Forbes Technology Council. I think it's $9,000 a year, and then have a market team write high-level bloggy posts and post them to Forbes under the name of the CTO or CEO. That's worthless. You shouldn't waste your time doing that. But you do have data. So if you can be open about that data and demonstrate the amazing stuff you have, have a real-time graph of things that your data sees all the time, and people will just come to see it. Norse effectively did that with a fake real-time graph of attack data, and people just constantly were referring to it, and the press picked up on it and watched it, and this is fascinating. Use your data, just as I learned to do. LinkedIn asked me to be a member of the first content accelerator cohort. And they asked me right when I was getting ready to publish the first edition of Security Yearbook, right? So I already have my life's work. I've got, 30,000 words I've written. So I've got content, and I had all the directories of all the vendors. And then I was also launching this platform. So I knew I'd have tons of data, and I learned a secret formula for LinkedIn awareness and getting engagement on LinkedIn, which is just post data in list format. Don't do infographics. Not worth it, because it takes 5 or 10 seconds for somebody to open up, expand it, look at it, try and figure out what it means, try and gain insights. Just post lists, and it ranked in some order. The order is going to piss off a bunch of people because they'll question, they dig into it immediately. It's like, I get this all the time. Why are you using head count as a measure of anything? I'm not. I measure head count, and I'm going to sort by head count. I'm not saying that the bigger company is a better company by any means, but people just glom onto it, immediately understand it. If you can figure out how to post lists, you're golden on LinkedIn.
I love it. It's what I'm going to be totally transparent. I've neglected LinkedIn so bad over the years because I do a lot of different things out there in the entrepreneurial space around leadership and mindset. And I truly believe that leadership is important. I really believe that leadership, everything, like John Maxwell said, everything rises and falls on leadership. But who's going to be the leader within the industry that sets the standard for how we're progressing forward within the future? And I think that's where content creation comes into play, because as you're sharing your knowledge, your skills, your experience, tips, tools, techniques, resources, all these things across a variety of platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's, whatever the case may be, I truly believe that content can inform, educate, entertain, and really help companies, teams, organizations, people connect with all of this in a more meaningful way. But how do we do that? What's that meaningful way in which we can do that? I know you just mentioned lists. Is there anything else beyond lists that I might be missing
Well,
that could help bridge the gap between how we can inform? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so I'm a writer, and so I study writing as well, right? I'm all over the forums on Reddit, and I've subscribed to a bunch of Substack posts on writing. I've got a whole collection of books on writing. I think the way those words are presented is the most powerful way to communicate, right? And I even like kind of keep a mental list of written documents that have changed the world. And of course, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, no question. And you may not know this, but there was a book written by a Russian in the early 1900s that became just kind of like the Bible for anarchists. And the assassination of Franz Ferdinand was playing out of that book. So here's somebody who caused World War I and 20 million deaths just with his little fiction book. That, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's just demonstrates the power of words and story.
Yeah.
And it's
stories are powerful.
Yeah, find the people in your organization that have that ability, either learned or just natural. A lot of people have it naturally, and put them to work. Get them. And you have to give them free rein. You can't constrict them and say, "Oh, we need a really good story about, why vulnerability management and reducing your risk surface is a big thing." Let them be inspired and then get it out there.
Yeah, stories are powerful. They bridge the gap between where, people are struggling, or where an organization, team, individual are struggling, and where you can take them, the opportunities, the possibilities, and that's where the power of stories come into play. So I want to dive into, before we close here, I want to dive into one of your books here, Cloud Computing, Secure Cloud Transformation. And I truly believe that the cloud is the future of where we're moving to, and everything being in the cloud. Everybody talks about, oh, the cloud this, the cloud that, but I don't think that everybody really understands what the cloud really is. I know I've worked in some organizations where we've had operating systems in the cloud, where really we had, a simple device that connected to the internet, and basically the operating system is online. All these different things were online. You didn't really have anything installed on the device. You just connected to the cloud, and well, there it is. I truly believe that it's a whole lot easier to maintain things that are in the cloud, subscription models, for things that are in the cloud. I want to talk about the cloud because I really think that a lot of people are failing to embrace it. Why do you feel that we haven't fully moved to the cloud yet, and what's really holding us back?
Yeah, I think, when I wrote that book, I was in the cloud bubble. I was just talking to CIOs who had fully embraced it, right? They came to be cloud first organizations, which to me, that it only means that for every new application, project, etc., you try and figure out how to implement it in the cloud before, falling back into a data center solution. And I assumed everybody was like that. And so that came out in 2019. Took about 2 years to realize, no, the vast majority of organizations are late adapters. They don't move quickly. I just saw somebody, posted one of those screenshots of an error screen for an AS400 in a retail operation. The IBM AS400s ran retail for a couple of decades. They're still there. There's still PDP-11s crunching away on critical business systems somewhere. And that's because, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. But there are advantages to the cloud. So I think it's, it'll be another 10 years before we're up to 80% of computing being in the cloud. But, people have to get driven to that. Companies that don't adopt the cloud have to go away, because they might. If data and, and functionality and reaching your customers is a critical part of your business, then you've got to be on the cloud. If you manufacture, handcrafted pottery, maybe never, but as soon as you open your Etsy shop, you're in the cloud. You're there already. But it's funny, that you start saying this right now when there's already a backlash against cloud computing, led by, speaking of thought leaders, the founder of 37 Signals, who is posting these great posts about how he's looked at the numbers and it doesn't make sense to be on AWS. It's too expensive. Better to, if you know what your usage is going to be over time, then you can calculate how much it costs to buy a server and deploy it and keep it up to date. And you got, 18 months to 3 years of service out of that server before you have to replace it. But, he still agrees cloud makes sense for startups because you don't have to buy that server and a, big pipe to the internet. And companies that have, frequent changes to their compute resources so they can take advantage of elasticity.
Yeah, I've been aware of the cloud and like you just mentioned, AWS. I still have not fully embraced all that. I know it's there. I know it exists. I just recreated another account here not too long ago because I got some things that I want to do on the platform. But it's like there's really an education gap, and I think that once people are fully aware of like what resources, what's out there, what is the cloud, how can you get on there? What is available? There's a lot with that. I mean, we could probably have a whole conversation on just the cloud alone.
Just literally do it, Terry. Just get on the cloud right now. The baby steps is create an AWS account and start using AWS's DNS service. It's phenomenal, right? It's just so easy. It's always going to be there. It's never going to go down. That was me knocking on wood. It's relatively inexpensive unless unless a lot of people are going to your website, and it just works all the time. And when you update, you put in a new CNAME or whatever, or you launch a new website and you update your DNS, it takes about 2 minutes to propagate over the entire internet. The first time I ever, updated a domain name, of course, this is 1992. It took 2 days for people to stop saying, "Hey, your website doesn't work." It was just amazing how connected everything is.
I've been building websites for years. I'm telling you, like propagation is one of those things. It drives me nuts. I literally got on the phone with certain providers that I won't name. And I'm just like, what, why, how, why are you sharing things? It's like, oh my goodness, the conundrum of how some of these companies and how some of these organizations, even when they get attacked, it's like they either fob you off to the security department or they don't really, I've had a couple of companies didn't take it serious and they wanted to charge me more money for certain things. And I'm sitting here like, oh my goodness, dude, I'm done with you. I no longer want to be a part of like your service provider because you're not providing service. And I think that there's a lot to unpack. I think there's opportunities moving forward, as the cyberscape, for lack of a better way of saying that, continues to progress, continues to evolve. New technologies are happening all the time. It presents opportunity, and I'm excited about that. I truly am. But here's something that I want people to understand, and I want to get your thoughts on this, and that's the difference between opportunity and possibility. And I truly believe that opportunity is one of those things that when you look surface level, skin deep kind of a thing, you're going to see the opportunities, but you're going to be inundated with the opportunities. But it's those thought leaders like yourself, Richard, that sees the possibilities, and you're creating that future. How are you creating the future?
So I believe, in a very narrow space, right? Because I've got all this experience both in cybersecurity and as an industry analyst. So of course I've written a book about industry analysis, 2 books, as a matter of fact. And, if you look at the early history, it was genius for getting Gartner to say, you know what, we're going to offer buy, sell, hold advice for technology, back when he did in the 80s. So, Gartner hasn't been disintermediated or anything like that. But I think there's a chance now to break up the focus, right? Because you could break it up by buying center, right? So Gartner's managed to sell a pool of analysts to large organizations because, the security folks will want to talk to the security team at Gartner. So they'll have a security subscription for the CISO, and they'll have a different one for the CIO who's worried about cloud transition. But there's an opportunity for data-driven, perhaps with AI behind it, solutions that can just answer questions. Just, all I want is the answer to this question. I'll probably have another question next month. So, I get sold on why subscription to a bunch of experts is good. But what if you had something that could just give you the answers? You would buy it because it would save you hundreds of dollars just that day in research. So I think that, as technology is growing, I don't think Gartner can keep up with it. I know the analyst firms don't pay as much attention to emerging technology as they should. They love to talk about it, but they don't analyze it and start getting that buy, sell, hold decision making for you. That there's tons of opportunities for subject matter experts to get into subscription-based services for selling their expertise.
I love that. Richard, thank you so much for your time here today. One final golden nugget before we go. If there was one piece of advice that you could share anybody watching this or listening to the podcast, what would that final golden nugget be?
It sounds like a trope or a cliche, but keep learning. Spend less time on Netflix and Amazon Prime and read more books, please. I've got so many books. I read them. I just wish there were more. Yeah, look at yours. I wish there were more people who just read books.
Yeah, I love that. Richard, thank you so much for your time here today. I had a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.